Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm Ecology, the Director of the ICA. Very glad to welcome you this evening and to welcome our panel this evening for this evening's ICA debate on public art and private money. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our chair for the evening, John Wilson. John.
Echo, thanks very much. My name is John Wilson. I'm going to be presiding over this debate. As Echo said, the title is, what is it? Public art, private money. Although I think those words are interchangeable. I'm sure we can rearrange it. It could be private art, public money, or maybe money art, art money. All these terms we could get to grips with tonight. Cuts in revenue and capital funding are on the way. It's almost certain. The axe being wielded by the Culture Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, could be lopping off something like 25% from government spending. The whispers are that it might even be a lot more. So how bad will the wounds be? Could they be fatal to some theatres and arts companies and museums and galleries? Or could the cuts encourage a new spirit of artistic resistance? Is there a new generation of cultured philanthropists out there who are willing to step into the breach? Just last week we saw the launch of a campaign, an artist-led campaign called Save the Arts. You may well have seen the film made by, a small animation made by David Shrigley, very amusing. And also this week, Mark Wallinger, Turner Prize-winning artist, took a 25% chunk out of Turner's Fighting Temeraire. Was it the Fighting Temeraire? Wasn't it? I can't remember. One of Turner's paintings. Took a chunk out of it to make the point. It was the Fighting Temeraire. Thank you very much to Alex. Well, with me here are 5 people who know all about the bottom line when it comes to culture. I'm going to ask each of them in turn to help flesh out their CVs. And let me start on the far end with Marcus Romo, who runs the Pilot Theatre. Marcus, a touring company based in York. But what does the Pilot Theatre do?
We've been touring now for 25 years, but we do a variety of projects. We're a national touring organisation, a regularly funded organisation by the Arts Council, and just doing a bit of jotting down, last year we made shows in Beijing, Bermuda, Budapest and Buenos Aires, and next year we're looking at the letter C to where we're going to start working. But I was fortunate enough to go to TED in California in 2007, and since that we've come back and we've run
TED?
TED is Technology, Entertainment and Design,
right.
It's a California conference looking across sectoral ways and models of innovation working. And we came back and at Pilot we created the Shift Happens conference. We've had 3 Shift Happens. This year Ken Robinson came and spoke, and also Jonathan Harris. I think we're going to call next year's Shift Hits the Fan, because it's the kind of thing we're doing. And one of the big things for us is that we are very active online. We're a small organisation.
Right.
We travel all around the country, and we've set up the Arts Funding Ning site, which is basically the support site and the area for debate and discussion. And we've been pretty active on the networks with pushing out the hashtag of the Arts Funding hashtag, and also helping to sort of generate the discussion and the debate, because for us this is a new landscape of communication and connectivity, and that's one of the things that we're interested in organisation in terms of having conversations and communicating with people.
So you're working at the grassroots, and we look forward to talking more Shift later.
Yep.
Alex Beard, I suppose at the other end of the scale, you are the Deputy Director of Tate. What does that mean? You're Nick Sorota's right-hand man?
Or left, depending on the day of the week, good cop, bad cop. Really my role sort of covers 4 things. One is overall income generation, 2 is capital development programme, 3 government relations, and 4 stepping in for Nick as needed.
If that's possible.
Right, impossible.
And to my right, man who probably needs no introduction, Sir Christopher Frayling, a man of many parts, former rector of the Royal College of Art, former chairman of the Arts Council, also historian, author, broadcaster. What does it say in your passport, Chris?
Historian.
Does it? Is that it? Simple as that?
Yeah. I wouldn't put chairman of Arts Council. I was chair of the Arts Council from 2003 to 2009, 5 years. And as no doubt will emerge, the Arts Council distributes about £453 million, about £500 million of public money to the arts, and simultaneously head of the Royal College of Art, which is the only postgraduate university of art and design in the world. So I sort of experienced things at the sharp end at the same time as trying to understand how to distribute the money. And it's an odd thing about the Arts Council that no one working in the arts had chaired it since Kenneth Clarke in the 1950s. You get ex-ministers, you get business folk, you get media folk, but someone actually, I thought it was very important to be simultaneously working in the arts and trying to chair the Arts Council, but it isn't
So you
common.
followed on from Lord Gowrie, Peter Palumbo,
Yep.
businessmen, politicians,
Yep.
so you were trying to break the mould a bit?
Yeah, trying to, and it's quite a difficult act to play actually, because you're simultaneously on the receiving end and the giving end, but it seemed to work. May even be seen as the golden age in retrospect, who knows?
If you say so yourself. To Chris's right is John Woodward. Now, John is the Chief Executive of the UK Film Council, but not for long, John.
No, not until the... I'm Chief Executive until the beginning of November, when I'll be moving to pastures anew. I think I was told there are some journalists in the room, so the first thing I would say is that I'm not actually here to either bury or praise Jeremy Hunt this evening. There are some very... there are some very delicate discussions going on about the level and nature of film support post-Film council.
We should just explain. I mean, I say
Yeah.
that you're not going to be there for long, but the UK Film Council is not going to exist for long.
No, the UK Film
government
Council
has recently
is to be abolished, and there is a very wide discussion going on inside the film sector at the moment about what the mechanisms are that will take the place of the Film Council. So on my watch, if you like, the Film Council has been there for 10 years as a coherent film support body. So we're basically the strategy organisation to support the film industry, the government's advisory machine, and most of the money, the public subsidy money, whether it's lottery money, grant in aid, to use the technical term, which is basically treasury cash. And in our case, which I think is what makes us different from a lot of other public sector agencies, the recouped money we get back from film investments, because what we do is we invest in films, quite often on very soft commercial terms, but if the films really turn into Bend It Like Beckham or Gosford Park, as they sometimes do, the money comes back and we reinvest them into new films.
Well, hopefully we can explore more about the proposals and the government. I mean, it's very loose talk at the moment, isn't it, about the way that the money, which they say will still be going towards film production, will be distributed if that's not through the UK Film Council, and whether private investment can play a part. Talking of which, at the far end of the table, Colin Tweedy is the Chief Executive of Art and Business, a sort of, it does what it says on the tin title. Colin, explain more. You're a kind of matchmaker, aren't you? You bring together the arts companies with the people with the money.
Yes, that's a simple way of saying, well, the longer way is we're a business initiative founded in 1976 by the private sector to develop support for the arts and culture across all art forms. We're funded by the state through the Arts Council of England, through the Scottish Arts Council, the Welsh Arts Council, and the Northern Ireland Arts Council and their governments, and of course the private sector, and we're the largest such body worldwide. And we do not claim, but we're very proud that the private sector in Britain gave last year £655 million to the arts. In the UK, that means at least 500 million to the arts in England. So that's, I think, something that the private sector should be enormously proud of. And when we say the private sector, we mean corporations, trusts and foundations, and individual philanthropists.
Well, let's start. I was going to say we're going to talk for possibly, I don't know, 3/4 of an hour, but I know there's a lot of people out there who will probably have questions or will want to join in the discussion. So we're not going to take up all of the time. And if you want to join in the discussion, let's talk for a while, and then we can broaden out the issues. And I think let's start with a history lesson. Chris said that in his passport it says historian. And can you start, Chris, by just reminding us of what happened in those post-war years? Because we take it for granted there is state support for the arts. There is a cultural state, if you like. And where is the proof that it has worked, that it has been worth the buck?
Okay. In brief, there had never been any public subsidy of the arts in the UK before the Second World War. And in the Second World War, a council was formed to distribute the live arts, the performing arts and the visual arts around the country as a kind of morale booster. And suddenly people realised there was this huge demand that they didn't realise was there. They thought they were just protecting the arts against the barbarians, but actually what was happening was they were feeding this increasing demand. So in 1945, Keynes came up with the idea of a permanent arts council. And what's interesting is that if you look at the debates in 1945, there's Beveridge talking about the 5 giants of physical poverty, want, disease, squalor, ignorance, and idleness. And out of that comes the National Health Service and the Public Education Act. At the same time, Keynes is talking about the sixth giant, which is poverty of aspiration, of which the arts are a very important part. So in its origins, the Arts Council actually put arts and culture on a level with education and health as a responsibility of a modern government. I don't actually think the Brits have taken that to heart in the ensuing 60 years. That's a minus. The plus, of course, is that when it started in 46, it gave out about £125,000 to 20 clients, most of them in London. Now the equivalent is 880 regularly funded organisations, most of them outside London, and 453 million, about £500 million of public money plus the lottery. And of course, what you've got between 1946 and today is the Public Education Act, local authorities allowed to spend money on the arts for the first time in 1947, the rise of the universities outside Oxford and Cambridge, the third programme on the BBC, which was a spin-off from the Arts Council, a year after it was founded, and, you know, the whole arts and broadcasting thing. All of that happens, creating a vast demand for the arts, a vast understanding for the arts, and a very dynamic arts sector. So it's actually, I mean, Keynes couldn't have dreamt what has happened, actually, in the last 60 years. It has become so huge as a sector.
There's a brilliant history lesson. I just want to throw that over to Colin Tweedy at the end there. And this name, the key name here, Maynard Keynes, John Maynard Keynes, I mean, he was also the chairman of the Opera House, wasn't he? He had high-minded cultural ideals.
And paid for the Arts Theatre Cambridge out of his own pocket.
Right, yeah. But isn't it interesting that we're talking, and there's a lot of talk at the moment about, are we seeing the end of Keynesian economics in the political field, at the same time when possibly we're seeing the chipping away, the dismantling of that Keynesian idea of the cultural state. And also, let me just throw something that Chris said there about the Brits never really took the ideal to heart. Do you agree with that, Colin?
Actually, I would have thought I mean, there's so much criticism at the moment on the right that actually the arts have become subsidy junkies and that they have become Keynesian in the most profound sense of the word. I mean, I'm told also by the right that actually Keynes assumed that the Arts Council would only be set up for a very short time.
That's not true.
Well,
no,
that's
fine,
not true.
Good. Well,
I hope ministers are better briefed than that.
I mean, the one thing on which I think, I mean, Arts and Business, when it was founded under the chairmanship of Lord Goodman, who was, you know, I would think we would say one of the greatest chairmen of the Arts Council, he said why Arts and Business, as it was called, ABSA, was absolutely vital, because there should always be a court of final appeal. And he said the private sector should always be a supplement to, not a substitute for public funds, but actually it was profoundly important that the private sector was there. And the one thing I would like to put on record, because there's a lot of articles saying opposite, Arts and Business has never said, and Colin Tweedy's never said, that the private sector is going to pick up the shortfall of any cuts between 25 and 40% on a short to medium term. We are very optimistic that the private sector inevitably is going to come out of recession far faster than any public sector, that actually we believe there is a great opportunity for more philanthropists and more companies to come through, but it should be a model of a mixed economy. Actually, now we are looking, I mean, I hope Jeremy Hunt, and I actually think Jeremy Hunt has said the one thing he doesn't want is American-style funding. He wants American-style philanthropy, and actually Sir Clive Gillinson has written an open letter to him, which was commented in The Guardian yesterday, that actually he's given a model of what we need to do.
Well, let's look at the specifics of the way the private sector can play a role a bit later. Before, you know, let's also, I just want to come back to Marcus and talk about this idea of public support. Has the cultural sector, have the arts become too dependent on public subsidy, do you think?
I think we should stop using the word subsidy. I mean, it's actually an investment. That's the real thing, isn't it? Because we can all know the economic impact that the arts has had, and we all know the figures, and we all know the strength of the growing industry and the nature of the amount it's growing.
So you're not subsidised?
Yeah, we receive a subsidy.
No, but you don't call it that. I mean, you make a distinction.
Well, of course we receive public money, and with that public money, we then make work, and we then, you know, we have earned income. We also bring in other funding as well. I mean, it's just one of the interesting things, just to go back a little bit on the sort of a history lesson from our point of view, is that I wouldn't be sitting here and being the artistic director of Pilot had it not been for Barclays. Because in the 90s, Barclays had a really innovative scheme called New Stages, which it funded experimental work in combination with the Arts Council. And that time, because I was a student in the 80s, Barclays was the place that you didn't know to go because of all its South Africa connections. But actually, then Barclays New Stages grew into Barclays Stage Partners, and we were able to make our first show in '98 with the Lyric. We made 2 shows with them, and the rest kind of meant that we then snowballed as an organisation because of that initial investment in partnership with the Arts Council, which is absolutely key for us at a critical time when we had a project that needed that investment. And it enabled us to make 960 performances of Lord of the Flies. That's what it did. But actually, that initial start meant that we were able to grow as an organisation. So there are key moments in people's development, in artist development, where a critical amount of funding can actually unlock a whole heap of other stuff.
Right. So that's what it can provide, it's what it can encourage. Let me just ask you quickly now, if there was 25% cuts across the board, and that, as I say, there are whispers that it could be 40%.
Yep.
We don't know if that's going to be equal misery, as they call it, or whether individual companies or institutions will take a bigger hit than others. But what would 25%, what would 30% mean to your company?
We had a board away day last week, and we were able to, we've got a great finance director who's, we've modelled the whole Excel thing. We can actually put in the figures and actually do the whole thing, and just watch the sliding scale fall off and watch when the graph goes down. And basically a 30% cut would mean we'd be unsustainable within 18 months on the current level of what our activity.
Unsustainable?
It would become, the board would then be called in and say, actually this company would cease to be able to operate, and we'd have to start to re-examine that. We have to look for new models now if that's 30% is going to come in within that time. If it's 30% over 4 years, then we're looking at different structures. But it depends on how it's going to hit and where it's going to hit. But also, we don't know how that's going to map out in terms of whether it's going to be top-ended or back-ended, or we're going to build in enough time to try and find ways and alternative models of restructuring and recalibrating how we do what we do.
Alex Beard, if the Tate took a 25 or 30% cut, that would take you back to funding levels, the sort of thing that you were getting, I guess, in the 80s?
No, mid-90s.
Mid-90s?
Yeah, 93, 94, something like that.
So you've worked this out. You've obviously done the figures and thought, what will 25% mean? But obviously, the Tate's operation is far bigger now than it was in the mid-90s.
No, sure, and our economic model has shifted substantially. So, I mean, when I first joined the Tate in January 94, we were getting about 85% of our money from government. Now it's about 40%, roughly. Government funding itself has still grown over that period, but partly in response to our cultural vision, partly more in response to public demand. We've grown hugely our self-generated income. And I think it's way, way too early to speculate what may or may not happen under different scenarios, because they're just scenarios at this stage, and October 20th isn't that far off, and we'll find out shortly after then. I think what is hugely important is that the sector as a whole doesn't go through the sort of hellish pangs that it did in the sort of late 80s to early 90s, where, frankly, we collectively lost the plot. There was a sort of reductive diminution in artistic ambition. The focus was on flicking prices up and putting on safer programs that led to, frankly, an artistic landscape that was just less inspiring for everybody. I think what's really, really important is that we hang on to what matters, which is the quality of the artistic ideas and boldness of vision and purpose. All that said, clearly 25% would be a very, very significant impact, and it would be for all of us to work out, as Marcus was saying, about how we would recalibrate the model, think differently about putting on our shows, and hopefully working closer together.
And just to really pin it down, because you're talking about you 40% the government subsidy or support is worth about 40% of your overall income. The rest of it is either sponsorship or self-generating income of different sorts. And what is that 40% worth, first of all? How much is what is the figure?
33 mil.
33 million.
Yeah.
And so if you were losing 25% of that, I mean, it's a lot. But in a really simplistic way, I mean, you look at Tate Britain, Tate Modern, Tate Liverpool, Tate St Ives, there's 4 venues, 25%, lose one of the venues.
Well, I'm glad you're not the chairman.
I'm being provocative, Alex. Could it get to the point where you have to make these sort of decisions?
Well, of course it could, but it won't.
It won't.
Because what we're going to do is, as I'm sure all of us around the table will do, is work out what is most artistically important and find innovative, imaginative and new ways of achieving that. Now, that's the first point. Second point is that the game's not over yet. We've got until October the 20th. And we've just seen over the last week the start of the Save the Arts campaign. You mentioned Mark's extraordinary intervention into the fighting Temeraire. And let's see what happens.
Yeah. Can I just pick up on something Alex said? Because, this drop in the percentage of government support as a proportion of the whole picture is very interesting. I mean, Keynes said he hoped that arts organisations, which started out with the subsidy being everything, would gravitate towards it being a contribution. And in a way, that's exactly what's happened in most arts organisations since the 80s. An awful lot of arts organisations in the 80s would treat Arts Council money, public money, as it, with a little bit on top. Now it's treated, I think, by everyone, and Colin would support this, as a contribution. And the gearing of that contribution to what it actually brings in is a very, very important argument. You know, how many government departments are there where for every pound of treasury money you put in, you get 3 or 4 back, which is basically the story of the large arts organisations. I'm not talking about small scale, but performing arts and visual arts organisations. A gearing of about 1 to 4. I mean, national health is a kind of sink, education is a sink. The money just goes down the plug. Fine, that's what it buys. But with the arts, the gearing is about 1 to 4, and that's exactly what Keynes hoped would happen, and it's happened since the 90s, I'd say.
John Woodward, is that model, that economic model, true for the UK Film Council? Is it?
Yeah, I mean, more so with films. I mean, what you're really doing, certainly in terms of film investment, what you're doing is putting in relatively small amounts of money. So you've got a £5 million movie, we might put £1 million in, so you're gearing it up by 5, absolutely, but what you're doing is you're using that money to be the difference between the producer being able to complete the budget, the finance plan for the film, and getting the film made. So the money's being used as the difference between the film being made or not being made. If the film is then a hit, we would then expect to make money back, which we would then reinvest. So in that sense, I think we're a slightly more sophisticated version of exactly what Chris is talking about.
And just in terms of hard cash, how much money comes from the Exchequer?
Well, we get about £25 million of. I think if you want to have a sophisticated discussion about this, I think the audience has to understand that for a lot of us, there are 2 quite different streams of income here. There's Treasury grant, which is cash from the Exchequer, and that is what is going to be contested over the next few months in the spending review. Aside from that, organisations like the Arts Council, Film, Sport, Heritage, have a slice of lottery money, the good cause money, and every time someone buys a lottery ticket, a little bit of it goes off and goes into the good cause pot. So we get about £25 million of grant. We get at the moment about £32 million of lottery money, and we get £8 to £10 million, whatever it is, in the year back from investments in films.
No discussions are ongoing, negotiations are ongoing, and you are still there as the chief executive, and you're having to still do these deals. But how much can you tell us about about where the money might go? They say the streams will continue, but they are just cutting away the bureaucracy, the amount of money that's spent on the overheads. Do you buy that?
Well, I think that is the stated objective, but if the functions are to continue, then they're going to have to go somewhere else, and they're going to have to be administered and taken care of somewhere else.
Because they've talked about funneling the money through either the BBC or the Arts
Channel
Council.
4 or the Arts Council or the BFI.
Could any of those organisations deal with it?
Well, technically all of those organisations could deal with it. I think it's a question of, the question I think that the government is grappling with now is what's the smartest way of doing it? Because the one thing everyone in the public sector and the arts has realised over the years, there's a difference between bad decision making and bad funding of arts and good decision making. And one of the reasons, frankly, that going back 10 years, one of the reasons the Film Council was set up, if you take the history lesson back 10 years ago, no disrespect to Chris, the Arts Council looked after lottery funding for film, and it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. We were reading headlines in the newspapers every day saying this cannot go on. So the Film Council was created with its own separate overhead, absolutely, but we administered the film production side of it much better. And I think the challenge that the government, DCMS, is trying to grapple with now, quite honestly, and by which I mean they are doing that quite honestly, is to try and work out what the best mechanism now is to make sure that there continues to be smart investment in films rather than bad investment.
But do you believe that they? Sorry, Chris, but do you believe that they still want to invest? Just through a different route. Do you believe that the political will is there to still see this channel of funds which will go to help seed fund the production?
I think what the summer has proved to the government is that diluting or diverting that money elsewhere would not be acceptable to the film sector.
Funnily enough, I mean, I mentioned to you, I just happened to bump into a film director on the way down here, John Hillcoat, who made The Road, and he made the proposition.
Yeah,
and he said to me that without the money that came from your organisation, the UK Film Council, he certainly wouldn't have made the proposition, money came from you. He also then told me about the situation in Australia, where he claimed you could claim as a filmmaker, as a director or producer, you could claim 40% back.
You can get 40% of your budgeted costs on Australian movies back in Australia if they're local independent productions, essentially.
That reflects something of the culture and the...
Which is absolutely the same, and the same exists in the UK. You can get 20% of your budget back off Her Majesty's government if you make a British movie.
And Chris,
in addition to lottery funding, if you get lottery funding, if you get it from the film.
I love the idea.
To just drill down, the others will forgive us, but I mean, if we can just drill down on this film idea for a moment, how important is that idea of reflecting a nation's culture, heritage, way of life through its filmmaking? Is it a viable political argument?
Yeah, I think it's an important political argument. But taking John's point, whoever is the body through which the money comes, it seems to me it has to be sublet to a body with very strong film expertise. Whether it's a sort of United Nations of different interests from different sectors of the film business, I don't think any of the organisations you've mentioned could actually do it themselves. So what we learned on the Arts Council is the council itself was discussing early lottery films, and they felt terribly happy about films where names like Thomas Hardy and William Shakespeare and Charles Dickens were on the script, but they felt a little bit uncomfortable when other names were on the script. So it was wrong. It was the wrong place to do it. So enter the Film Council. Whoever does it, it's got to be sublet to people who know what they're doing.
And that's the challenge for the government to fix.
So whether it's the film industry or the museums and galleries or theatres or art centres, there is a consensus that cuts will happen, that the public stream of the funding that's coming from government, from the Exchequer or from the lottery is going to be cut.
No. Sorry, I'm not in a particular mood to be particularly enthusiastic about Her Majesty's government over the last month or so. But to be fair to them, it is absolutely clear that the lottery money for film, it has been established now by Jeremy, by Ed, that is not going to be cut. So
not the lottery fund.
Not the lottery fund.
And they have said, to be clear, that they have said that there will be some kind of realignment of the good causes as they were originally set up, and that's going to be after
2012.
2012. So after the Olympics. So if the cuts start to bite next year, and then the year after, you're going to see pain on the ground at a time when everybody's flooding in.
You are. But sorry, I don't want to bore on the economics of the thing. But I think we have to get this right. There is a real distinction here between Treasury grant and what may or may not happen to that, which drives an awful lot of cultural activity in the UK, and what's going to happen to lottery money. Because the reality of the matter is that the lottery funding overall for the arts is likely to rise in 2012, 2013.
After the Olympics.
Because the money that's currently being siphoned off.
It's after the Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's 2 years away. That's 2 years away.
At which time a lot of arts companies could go bust. Unless Marcus finds a solution, unless you find a solution to, and you talk about meeting with your board, and you see the short-term future, unless you can come up with some kind of new way to plug the gap, you could hit the wall.
Well, I mean, us and lots of other organisations, depending on how the cuts and the acts fall. Just as an interesting point to pick up on the fact, I read Jeremy Hunt's blog, it's what I do. I think you all should as well. And Ed Vaizey's blog hasn't been updated since June the 14th, if anyone's interested. But also on Jeremy Hunt's blog, he says that the great thing is the Olympics is going to be that the ceremony is going to be led by these amazing film directors, Stephen Daldry and Danny Boyle, all of whom we'd agree are fantastic. But actually, where did they start? Yeah. I saw Stephen Daldry's Metro Theatre in Sheffield doing the Reggae Trousers Philanthropist in the late 80s, subsidised by the Arts Council. Also, Danny Boyle starting off at the Royal Exchange. These people don't just come and suddenly wake up one morning and decide to be film directors. There's a whole long game that's played around the nurture and the growth and the development of artists, which is what I think we're talking and fighting for here. It's not a short-term solution, it's a real long-term vision, and that's where these people come from.
And can I just say, on that, I mean, one of the strongest arguments, Alex has said, the game isn't over insofar as it's a game until October the 20th. One of the strongest arguments the arts can put at the moment is about the sort of public-private connection that already exists. Not purity of arts versus business, but how it's a mixed economy at a very profound level, and has been for about 20 years. Will Hutton did this report a couple of years ago, which didn't actually get enough publicity in my view, about how every sector of the British arts has a commercial correlative. Literature, publishing, theatre, commercial theatre and film. Cameron Mackintosh, the great impresario, said that the public sector enables his empire to happen, that the public sector pays for drama students to go through drama college. The public sector pays for them with their first job at a regional rep. The public sector pays for their second job when they come to London. Then they're ready to appear in Les Miserables. He said, I'm not going to pay for all that. That's there. That's a given. So my entire empire rests on that. And I think that model is really interesting. Not just how much money the Treasury money gets through gearing, through the actual arts activities, but the relationship between the public arts sector and the creative industries. And I don't think that argument's been put strongly enough. It's the kind of argument the Treasury will listen to.
Alex.
Well, it's an ecology. And I mean, the rise in London as a centre of the contemporary visual arts is an extraordinarily powerful example of that, where you have the Turner Prize set up by a group of Tate patrons, private sector, that happens at the Tate Gallery, funded by the state, public sector that acts as a catalyst for growing interest in contemporary visual arts, taken to the next level by Charles Saatchi at Boundary Road, which in turn leads to an environment where Brit art can happen, take modern public sector, freeze private sector, and now this extraordinary burgeoning of brilliant artists and great shows. And we are blessed, but that is because it is this interwoven, interdependent ecology.
And I think, sorry, just one final thing on that, that in the 80s, the last time there were big cuts, there was a report written called The Economic Importance of the Arts, and it was entirely about tourism. Yeah. The whole argument about the economics of the arts has changed in the last 20 years towards this intermeshing of the creative industries. It's quite new, actually, and tourism's very important. You know, lots of figures about how overseas visitors come to visit the arts, etc. But I think this other argument about industry and the contribution to economic recovery is actually a very strong one.
Colin Tweedy, let me bring it back to you, because you said a few minutes ago, that it was worth the private contribution to the cultural sector worth something like £500 million this year. You recently predicted, didn't you, that it was going to rise to £1 billion a year by 2016, within 5 or 6 years, at a time when everybody is counting every penny and the coffers are running dry.
Yeah. My goodness, did I get into trouble for that. It was a figure which we believed in and we believe in, because we believe that was the calculations we made, but we said that you also need to create the mechanisms to stimulate that. The Arts Council 2 years ago, no, I won't bang on about Christopher, because
I was the chairman at the time.
You were chairman at the time. We had a matching grant programme which actually virtually every arts organisation in England has said bring it back, because it was a way of bringing in new money into the arts and the private sector. At the time, Chris's officials said business was hardwired to give money to the arts. It's complete bollocks. No business is hardwired to do anything other than make money for its shareholders. The fact is that people like you guys have stimulated the private sector to give money to arts organisations is bloody marvellous. And that's the skill of the arts community and our brilliant fundraisers. But the fact is, Clive Gillinson, which I really think, if none of you have read Clive Gillinson, and he used to be the director of the LSO, he's now director of the Carnegie Hall, he's basically said, we need a strategy to enhance the arts in the UK, not just to reduce government funding. Too much conversation, which, unlike tonight, because we're actually moving on, is simply about don't cut the arts, otherwise they'll all die. I mean, there's an issue about, you know, the 25%. I mean, Nick Clegg is saying it's 25% over 4 years, so institutions should only be being cut, if they are to be cut at all, by 6% a year. If funding agencies are going to say, oh, goody, I can now kill this organisation off, whatever it is. First of all, I would like to say I would like decision-making to become slightly more transparent, particularly in this moment, for all decisions of the Arts Council or any other agency to be done behind closed doors, and you're told, by the way, you're dead, best wishes, is a problem. But actually...
But what do you want, a public forum?
Why not?
I used to have lots of meetings, actually.
Yes,
with you,
I mean, you had lots of meetings. I'm not sure about your successor. But the interesting thing is, there are, I mean, we in our private sector policy of the arts said that, and actually Clive Gillinson's proved it, we created something called the Big Arts Give 2010. Peter Bazalgette in The Guardian said there should be a very big arts give. This is a model where we are putting £300,000 of money, Arts and Business and Alec Reid. It's going to be on an online digital campaign to raise money from individual philanthropists. That 300,000 will become 3 million. There's an amazing amount of gearing. There are fantastic models of stimulation. And what Clive Gillinson says is, there are amazing models. If we want the American system of fundraising, then we've got to look at the mechanisms that have stimulated Americans, which are challenge grants and match funding and clarity of tax. I mean, we have a weird tax system which gives a lot of benefits, but a lot of people don't understand them, and there's some weird anomalies. But I actually think there is genuine, real money to be had, but what we've got in a lot of the debates are people saying business people are horrible, individual philanthropists are shit, all we want them is the money from the public sector, and as we're all saying around this table is...
But what, people are saying that to you? You know, people who run arts organisations are saying that they don't want the private money because...
Well, they're basically virtually saying it in the public press, which is rather like saying, oh, we can't raise money in X, Y. I mean, I won't repeat what I said about a city in Yorkshire where this person on the radio said, but there is no money for the arts from the private sector in Leeds. Well, I think Leeds is one of the richest cities in Britain.
Oh,
this
I heard
idea
that. That was you on the radio on The World at One with...
Yes, but I'm not going to go in.
Well, no, I'm going to remind you. I'm going to remember it. Remind you. It'll come back to me. John.
Can I just come at this a slightly different way? I mean, there are going to be cuts, right? No one's denying that. And there is therefore going to be a gap in the perception of what is needed to fund the arts in the UK. So the question is, okay, first of all, quantify the gap. If you can do that, then the next question is, what's going to fill the gap? And the thing that I'm struggling with personally is that I think there is a widely held and deeply ingrained view, you know, right the way across society, from the rich through to the poor, that it is the role of the state broadly to support culture and art in the UK. And at the moment, what I can't see on the horizon in terms of public policy are the kind of strategies and initiatives that might be brought into place to actually leverage philanthropy properly. And that probably takes you into the area of tax incentives. And I think that cannot be about reinterpreting existing tax regimes. There has to be something that works in order to generate, for the reasons that you point out, that companies are in the business of, they have fiduciary duties to their shareholders. They're not actually there to hand money to the arts. You have to create some sort of a structure that makes it fiscally advantageous for corporates or high net worth individuals to contribute their hard-earned money to the arts. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. I'm not suggesting you haven't done a fantastic job, but if the gap is going to be as big as people are suggesting it is, then I think it behoves policymakers and government to start to think about what a proper tax break for the arts looks like.
Can I just say there's a model for how to do that? Yeah. I think it's a model that the film industry, 3 or 4 years ago, when the tax incentives for investing in film began to wobble a bit, mounted a very large campaign to the Treasury when Gordon Brown was still Chancellor, and actually got him to reverse the decision, so the tax incentives remained. That's a very practical thing that can be discussed between now and October the 20th. How do you... It's no use saying, let's have the American model, without incentivising like the American model.
Right.
And how would one begin to do that from the tax point of view? I think it's an interesting issue. I know Colin's been going on about it for years. Not essential, but...
There are more tax incentives than a lot of people know.
Right, okay, well that's really good. People are going to get lost talking about that. Let me just come back to the kind of, I suppose, more philosophical idea, and what you were alluding to earlier, Colin, when you said that this idea of whether the arts are hardwired into the business community, whether that's bollocks or not. Do you, Marcus, when you are looking for some kind of corporate sponsorship or philanthropy or private money, do you have to, in effect, hold your nose when you're taking money?
I'm going to use the Yorkshire card here, having travelled down from York today, and want to say that one of the big things is, and it was one that the article that Sam West wrote in his letter in the Evening Standard, which is on the arts funding Ning, that actually it's all very well to talk about philanthropic giving, but actually the moment you move out of the metropolitan centres, then it does become increasingly more difficult. Let's be realistic about this. It is really difficult. We're on a 22-week tour. We're funded by the Arts Council to not come into London. So we do go all around the country and take it to those places where there is a small amount of provision. That's what we do as our touring contract. Now, I'm just saying that it is really difficult to try and attract that, which is why the model for us in the time when we were able to attract the Barclays thing was because we weren't able to make all the pressing the flesh and doing all that kind of stuff, because actually we were able to go to a conduit, which was Callaway, that actually brokered the money between the Arts Council and Barclays. We were able to apply and to bid into that, and we got 50-50 Barclays Arts Council money to enable another project to happen. So there have been models, but it's very difficult, and it's a false premise to pretend that, you know, outside of London it's all sunshine and roses. It's completely not. And I do take the point that, you know, Leeds has been hit hard, and you know there are, because everyone is competing for that, and there are smaller amounts of arts organisations competing for less money. So it is thing. I just want to come back to a point that you made, and it's the Ken Robinson argument really. It's the idea about creativity and creative industries. I mean, it's that thing, if you go into a class of 4-year-olds and ask who's an artist, every single child will put their hand up. You go back year on year and less will do so, because we are educating the creativity out of our young people. If we use the creativity card, if we use the innovation card, which is the only way we're going to survive, the only way we're going to get is we have to be creative, innovative, and that's where the arts are really the stimulus, they are the catalyst, they are the one things that help to promote that creative thinking, that innovation. That's the thing we should be actually taking to government and actually playing that, rather than this is just about the arts, because actually it's a much broader, and the creative industries in terms of what they earn, it's the fastest growing organisation, it's the one thing we do really well.
And Alex, you, I presume, are having to do some of those, putting those deals together with the corporate sponsors, and it's difficult sometimes, isn't it? Because we saw recently at Tate Britain, for the opening of the Fiona Banner show with the big planes hanging there, and I remember being there and being walking around, and then the protesters arrived who were protesting against the sponsorship by BP. Now that was responding to a specific situation in the Gulf of Mexico, obviously, but you have to, it's a difficult relationship that you have to get across sometimes, isn't it?
Well...
Or do you not worry about where the money comes from?
Well, look, all money's dirty. And,
Gosh.
I mean, it is. All money's dirty.
Gosh, that's the quote of the night.
Richard Wentworth puts it brilliantly. He doesn't know, with the tenner in his pocket, he doesn't know where it was. Richard Wentworth, the artist.
Yeah.
Tenner in his pocket, doesn't know where it was yesterday, doesn't know where it's going to be tomorrow. But he does know what he's going to do with it today, and it's what he does with it that really counts. And you know, our mission is to increase the public's knowledge, understanding and enjoyment of art. And in order to do that, you need to have money. And in order to get money, you have to present with conviction your idea, and you have to get people to buy into it, whether those are individuals, whether they're members of the audience, whether they're companies, whatever. The, going to BP, I mean, clearly there's you know, a huge amount of controversy around the role of big oil, particularly sparked by the environmental and human tragedy of Deepwater Horizon. And you know, that is a entirely legitimate and significant role in society. I suppose what I'd say is that BP have been a 20-year supporter of the Tate. 30 million people have been able to see changing displays at Tate Britain as a result of their contribution. They've never once made an artistic suggestion or comment, and I don't think as a result of their sponsorship that a single litre of petrol has been bought that would otherwise not have been without their support.
But that's not the reason.
And so just come on to this,
yeah.
and so that you know, I think that you know, do significant organisations that are large players in society have a role to contribute to that society's health? And I say yes, and is one of the ways in which they can do that through sponsorship, and I say yes, and is net the effect of that to inspire people through you know, artists' work being presented that otherwise wouldn't be, and the answer to that is yes. That's not to say that there shouldn't be a perfectly legitimate and passionate debate about that changing context, but
that's what you can get out of it, it's
yeah.
what the institutions can get out of it.
Yeah.
Let me just throw it back over to Colin Tweedy. All money is dirty. Do those companies, those private corporations, look to the arts to clean up their image?
I'm actually going to quote, this is for Christopher's benefit, I think actually I bored tremendously with this quote, by my founder, the great chairman of the Arts Council, Lord Goodman, who said, "I don't care where the money comes from, it can be rolled by the mafia. If it goes to the arts, it becomes good money." Now that's actually saying, yes, it does, but actually the view is art and business are two of the most vital forms of the human experience. They go together since man crawled out of his cave. He'd been looking for someone to support his art, which was normally inside the cave, and then we moved it out. But the fact is, business supports the arts because it's good for business. If they don't do it for business reasons, then someone could easily question this as corporate theft. But the fact is, creating an environment which is successful, healthy, stimulating, that you have bright kids coming out of school with articulate views about life, love and literature, then there'll be better employees and better shareholders, etc. So it's about investing in the community in which you operate, is what IBM said in the US, 50 years ago. And it's true. And my view is this idea that public good, private bad. Where does all public money come from? The fact is we've got less public money because the banks went belly up and the businesses were dragged in with them.
Can I just say, we do tend to draw the line, we don't like tobacco, we don't like
some people like it. The Royal Academy accepts tobacco money, so does Glyndebourne.
Okay, most of us don't. And we don't like sort of evil regimes, but we're okay with BP, which has a long track record and so on. One of the iron rules of sponsorship, in my view, wearing my RCA hat, is that the first person you go to is someone with an image problem. That's how it is, because they've got a reason for actually making you feel better about the corporation. If I flip it, I don't know many arts organisations that want to give back their government grant because of the war in Iraq.
Good point.
Also, I just slightly pick up on that, because my experience is not actually that the majority of Tate sponsors are, or indeed actually any of Tate sponsors are sponsors because they've got an image problem. BP started its sponsorship in the late 80s as on a roll. It had no image problem at all. It just had a conviction that it ought to be contributing to very important aspects of society, and they've done it consistently over the last 20 years. And
isn't it great? They're giving their money to that.
What I do think that they wanted, and I do think that absent the last 12 months they've got out of it, is that on balance people might think rather better of them than other big oil companies who do not engage in society in such a way. And it is by no means every big oil company that does that. And I think the same is true of our financial services supporters, of our consumer goods supporters, and so on.
I'm aware that there probably are questions.
I'm amazed. I'm amazed by all this. If I started being choosy where money came from to make films, you wouldn't get any films made. Yeah. If we're trying to make art or help artists make art, then in the end, the ends justify the means. Get the money, make the films.
But you're all agreeing on that.
Yeah.
You're all agreeing on that. Let me just
it was the money. It was all money's dirty as an opening bid. I found a little bit hard to swallow. That was
well, all clean. I suppose the point is
retreat.
It depends what you do with it. And I guess, John, I'm disagreeing with you. When you make a great film, that's doing good with money. If you put on great art, that is also doing good with money. And it's actually what we do, what our mission is, that counts, and how we inspire audiences.
Can I just ask something?
Sorry, can I just say, now is not the moment to be squeamish. It really isn't. If things are going to be as tough on October the 20th as some of us think it's going to be, now is not the moment to get particularly squeamish.
Let's get some questions from the audience. Before we do that, let's just get a sense of where we've got to and what you are as a panel agreeing on. There is some consensus. There will be cuts. We don't know how much it will be. You all agreed there will be cuts. Colin says that there is private money from the corporate sponsors and the philanthropists racking up $500 million at the moment, and it's rising. And none of you are disagreeing that that's a fact. And the lottery money will continue and will come back on stream after 2012.
And will not be cut.
So it will not be cut. So there was a subtext to this debate that the arts are going to be in crisis. There's going to be this massive cut. You all seem quite happy with it.
No, not at all.
It's not doom and despair.
No, what we're doing is trying to say there is absolutely no point in going on about how awful it is. Let's think of positive ways in which we can either get out of the situation or improve it, which I think is what the discussion is, whether it's about tax, whether it's about sponsorship, whether it's about public-private, the creative industries argument. It's actually saying to the government, we can help you, right? Have a positive attitude rather than, if we all go around, you can see it is so unusual to see, you know, the armed forces whinging in public, the police, we usually do all that, the police whinging in public, you know, all of this is going on at the moment, and it's getting them absolutely nowhere. Yeah. And I honestly think, you know, what's great about this conversation is we're not doing that. Right. So I think, not everything is all right, though. Not everything's all right.
Well, and just one final thing, which is that, you know, the last generation, we've had a virtuous cycle of sustained investment, bold ambition, growing audiences and a richer cultural scene. It's very easy to turn that into a vicious circle through being cynical about it, whinging, and not focusing on what really counts, which is putting together the very, very, very best arguments you can to government and the very, very best work you can for your public.
Most of these arguments have been viewed through the institutional prism. And Marcus, let me just bring you back to something you mentioned about growing up in the 80s, a time of recession, a time when Mrs. Thatcher was trying to dismantle the Arts Council and there were massive cuts, a time of fantastic creativity in this country, when, you know, arguably the greatest generation of what became young British artists was squatting in warehouses, were creating really exciting new work without a penny of public subsidy. There is an argument that says that recession's good for the arts. It gives a kick up the arse.
Yeah, but we don't want to have that argument of saying you've got to starve in your garret to make
No,
it work.
I'm not saying you have to starve in your
know,
garret, but does it not give, as I suggested at the beginning, does it not sharpen the senses a bit? Does it make people realise that, you know, there could be some oppositional
often it's said that you can take the political temperature and the kind of a country by its theatre and stuff and what you've got there. And, you know, at the moment we've kind of got a glut of really sort of, you know, big sort of shows that kind of just make people kick along, and you can look back at all the sort of the stuff that's running in the West End, look at all the musical stuff, and there's not, basically it's okay, it's good to kick back against something, it's good, and we know that, and that's really positive. And, you know, artists aren't going to suddenly stop making work because actually they don't work. We work differently. We don't have to go, I will have to wait for the money to come. People still will make stuff. But my argument really is, I think that, you know, it's the Eric Gill quote, that artists really aren't different sorts of people, but actually every person is a different sort of artist. And for me, it's really about the enabling and the participation and the inspiration of these young people, and actually giving people the opportunity. I have a concern about the sort of the generation that's going to be sort of hitting the sort of the workplace in 3 or 4 years' time, as to what's actually that world's going to look like. And so what we have to look for is for those models. And I just think, while I haven't been tweeting and stuff on here, I've been following the debate online here on the hashtag, and there's some really important things to be done with this technology that we have now. And there's those things like Sponsumi, it's written Sponsumi if you've seen it online, and also WeFund, the crowdsource initiatives of people getting together, networking, and actually collaborating to help generate stuff and interest and money. There are new models that are happening, which are still, you know, they're burgeoning and they're coming out, but I still think I feel very positive around the opportunities that these might throw.
And just very briefly, Chris, because I just want to talk about your role as the Director of the Royal College of Art. So you've seen all these generations of young artists coming through until quite recently. And, you know, the cynics would say that they have been subsidised, supported, feather-bedded like no other generation before. What's that done for the sort of...
Well, actually, they found a way in the 80s. Of, there was a grant, I forgot what it's called, just after leaving college, which set you up as a small business. I forgot what it was, perhaps someone in the audience knows. And all those YBAs actually used it just after leaving college to tide them over for a couple of years.
In fact, Damien's first break was a grant from the London Docklands Development.
So although the money wasn't coming from the arts, you know, sometimes by ducking and diving and finding, you know, soft money, artists are actually rather good at that economy of makeshifts that enables them to survive. So it wasn't quite as lean as you say, but the word collaboration I think is important. I mean, Jeremy Hunt has said, I don't want to talk to 60 people, I want to talk to one person about the arts, right? What he meant was there's too many noises going on all over the place, and collaboration, coming together, arts organisations which have been trained since the 80s to be competitive, have, I think, got to show enormous generosity of spirit in sinking their differences, getting together and presenting a united lobby in a collaborative spirit. I think that's a really important word, because I think what Jeremy Hunt meant, not that literally one person, but that if there's too many voices, possibly cancelling each other out, then I don't think that'll serve the best interests of the arts.
I think one of the dangers, and thinking of the Film Council, people have said to me, what we seem to be doing in England, which never is, I don't think, going to happen in the rest of the UK in the funding system and across continental Europe, is cut first, worry later. There seems to be within government, certainly within the department, a great sort of sense of let's do a burnt earth policy, and if there are little roots here and there and little green shoots, in 2 years that'll be fine, because basically everything will survive. I just think we need, you know, a strategy for growth. I'm putting together for the next week a strategy of growth, which I will challenge the Secretary of State and the Arts Council to either back or tell me to piss off, or, you know, because we believe that there is a huge opportunity. And as you say, Marcus, I mean, the digital divide, I mean, I spoke with on the Liberal Democrat conference on Monday with Don Foster and Nesta, and there's amazing, as you say, extraordinary. I mean, you know, I can see my own colleagues. I mean, I can see them glowing in there with their Apple Macs. You know, again, you know, putting out twittering all the time, and the way that the new art is coming online, and what the Tate has done with BT, right, your sponsor, is fantastic. So let's be optimistic, but we need a strategy. At the moment, we're not getting one from government.
Let's leave it there. That's a really good point to finish on. Let me just ask each of the panellists in turn, just to sum up, if you've learned anything tonight, if you concur with that, agree that actually the arts as a sector has to get, I suppose let's boil it down to basics. Colin, everything is going to get leaner and fitter.
I think what I've learned from tonight is this is a passionate subject, this is a passionate audience. What we need to do is we need a strategy for growth to enhance arts and culture in these islands. We need to get it right, and there is no strategy and there's no proper debate. Let this be the beginning of a debate, not the end of it. And you're absolutely right, Paul, the cuts are coming and the cuts have been decided. Now let us work for growth, because that's what we need. Let's be optimistic. The future is ours, and let's control it.
John, quick summing up.
Change is inevitable, except from vending machines.
Very good.
So sort of summing up.
That's a very good one.
Chris, beat that.
Okay. No, I can't. I used to put broadcaster on my passport, but everyone in America always asked me if I knew Benny Hill. Anyway, collaboration, key issue, you know, people settling their differences, even the heritage sector and the arts sector going to the government together and settling their differences and not seeing themselves as competitive. And just the point about art and business, look, ever since serious art was invented, some sort of subsidy has been required to protect it from the market. The church, the bankers, that exhibition of Renaissance drawings at the BM, where there was a whole panel about, believe it or not, if it wasn't for the bankers, the Medici, none of this would have happened. The court in the 18th century, philanthropists in the 19th century, and the state since 1946. It was ever thus. It's always been a mixed economy in this country, and long may it continue. The issue is the tail must never wag the dog.
Just very quick yes or no, will the Arts Council survive? Will it still exist in 2 years' time?
Well, I hope so. I hope so, because one of the great things about Keynes, having come out of a war where he saw what the Nazis had done to the arts in aestheticizing politics, and he'd seen what Stalin had done to the arts in the Soviet Union, he wanted an organisation that was at arm's length from government, as a way of protecting both the government from artists and artists from the government. And unless you have such a direct funding of the arts by career civil servants who aren't necessarily interested in the arts, rather than funding by people who are passionate about the arts, seems to me to be a disaster.
A bit more than a yes or no, but never mind.
Sorry, yeah. So the answer is I hope not. I really hope not.
I put a question to Chris. Can the Tate and the other national museums hold out against charging? Will we see charging on the door within 5 years? Oh.
I would be absolutely astonished if there was charging at the Tate, and certainly not while I'm working there. I mean, in terms of what you know, lessons from tonight, I think you know, we're definitely going to face some very, very tough challenges over the next couple of years. I take Paul's point about that those decisions may well have been made or are being made now, but I think we don't yet know how it's going to play out. I think there is a lot of scope for innovation, creativity, and actually artistic boldness in how we meet those. And I think in terms of what I've picked up, I think the power of mobilising the power of our audiences, which are huge and have grown very, very substantially, and coming up with better ways of communicating that advocacy to government is crucial.
Marcus, final thought, please.
Since I've been here at the ICA, another 500 people have signed the Save the Arts petition. That's a fact, I've just checked it. the actual power that we have in terms of our networks and our communities, our audiences, our participants, the people we work with, and our colleagues are actually going to give us the strength to actually make the case and make the argument and to make the work we want to see.
Thank you very much indeed, everybody. I think there's been a lot of questions raised, a lot of answers, and the decision may well have already been made in Whitehall. Maybe we should all be back here after October the 20th and George Osborne's big day. In the meantime, let me thank the panel and all of you for coming. Thank you very much indeed.